For the second cluster, 15 minutes of a presentation and then 5 minutes of Q&A. We'd like to invite to the stage the team led by Pau Studio Associato.
Good morning in the meantime. It's actually difficult to present two projects because you don't know how to put them together. Yeah, okay, yes. And you don't know where to put your energy. And, yeah. So, good morning. What we tried to do in these two very different cases of the Civic Land Center and of the lift tower was to try to actually do the same thing in both places. So try to, in both cases, to do a building that is sustainable, that doesn't force to use a lot of energy, that treats public ground with a lot of care, doesn't waste soil. And what we ended up doing is two completely different things. So on one side, and this because the two different challenges are extremely different, and not only because the contexts are different, but also because the ambition, the problem is different. In one case, we are dealing with a tower, a significant tower of under 20 meters, which we decided to lift in order to leave the public floor open as much as possible, and that had to be a sort of a special building, a cool building, so to speak, because it needs to be attractive for the higher strata of the Albanian bourgeoisie, should be metropolitan, should be daring and challenging. And on the other side, we designed a public building that we treated literally as a public building, so the Civic Land Center, that we compacted all around the existing building in order not to waste energy, not to waste soil, and to produce a very, in a way, very classic urban figure. So, and you see, the same intention leads to very different formal results. So this is the lower ground of the tower that is completely permeable, that will be able to address also different possible situations that will happen in the future because the area is under transformation. And on the other side, we see how the compact volume of the Civic Land Center allows us to spare as much as possible permeable soil, so the building is just half of the area. And this attention to the public ground, to the relation of the landscape and building, the accessibility, the public nature of the civic land. And again, these two very composed figures that are always measured to their specific context, the urban context of the city, but at the same time are very, very different in the ways they address this area, because this is the slender metropolitan tower, and that is the more fetish, more sturdy, but also more generous urban building that has inside of his belly at the upper level this very generous public room. And so we have these two buildings that of course are always not only measured onto their immediate context, the urban context, but also to the larger geography of the city with the mountain in the background, and are of course points from which to observe all of this mixture of city and landscape. And in the end, they result these two different figures. One is slim and skinny and also fragile to a certain extent. The other is fattish and sturdy. They're a little bit like kind of classic comic duo like Quixote and Sancho Panza. And on these, I leave you to Sam.
Thanks, Pier Paolo. So I'll start with the tower, explaining it, but I think you can understand it quite clearly. Its main quality is in its name, which is that most of it's lifted off the ground, and the three legs that make the public space then also support the building and become programmatic elements below as well as above in the various kinds of housing levels. And so on this curve where there's not a clear kind of front face and we have a site that's quite set back, we thought about sort of scattering the directions of our own project and of this spot because, as Pier Paolo said, it's a changing place. And you can see that quite clearly as you look at the model. If some of you kind of glance, you all have a different angle from it there. And we came to the idea of lifting the bar quite some time ago in our process, and it's three offices, right? So our colleague Gilles, who's not here, and we spent hours and hours and hours almost every other day on Zoom debating these forms. And I think the lifting then with Yellow Office, our landscape company, became partly about what that ground might be. And so we started to think about a kind of porous, almost mineral environment, because it's still quite a big building above that kind of what we're calling a public square. But we're making use of the parts of the site that are ours and the parts of the site that aren't without, crossing the boundaries. So you see the existing situation. We have a bar, which is essentially a sleeping zone, and that's lifted up, freeing the square. And then we're adding, in the case of student housing or other places, or for lack of a better word, living volumes that support the building. And then those volumes, when you come back down, are framing and connecting this pretty diverse set of urban parameters, which again, we can't actually see yet because it's all, underway. So I think we're particularly fond of these spaces and how they might be used. It's quite clear that the ground floor is entrance to the building, of course, but also commercial spaces sort of bleeding up in the 5 floors below the bar level to amenities. So it's a kind of combination of those two, which you'll see. But it's a fairly open plan. However, there isn't a tremendous amount of structural acrobatics to achieve that opening. And here you have the public levels, which again are a mix between public of the city and public of the building. And here's a student housing. And here, for example, on this floor, you have pass-through spaces. So a kind of, to use the German word, a Laubengang entrance from the 3 cores. And then they lead to cluster spaces, which are then shared between student housing. But as you move up the building, the apartments get denser and are accessed by each individual core, such that you have extremely small, simple circulation. And it's quite an efficient building in that sense, with a variety of balconies and loggias. And there's quite some variation in the possible floor plan with these 3 cores, which are both circulation and structure. And then you get to a public rooftop. I don't think we need to talk about the parking, and I think the structure is quite obvious, but it's a quite clear notion how these 3 legs brace the whole. But looking back from the top, so you've got, in the end, you have 4 different facades, which have sun shading or are set back. They're not glass facades entirely because some of them are set back. Where they're not set back, they have shades in front and are, let's say, punched windows behind the shades. And so here you can see the kind of punched windows, and you can see that there's the bar in the kind of corner of the bar where air can pass through. And in some floors, that is connected to the same apartment that's in what is the square shape on the left. And they all have metropolitan, amazing views, of course. And so from a very, very simple sustainability point of view, there's cross ventilation everywhere in this building. And so as a result, the facades are quite open. And I think that the quality of living there will be very strong. That's both useful as a social idea and as a air idea. And back to the ground floor, which I think is our most important, most valuable space in the proposal.
Yeah, and so speaking of the Civic Land Center, the proposal is very simple. So we decided to keep the building that is existing. This building that is existing can, given that the cadastre, the land use offices need a lot of dark space, so archive, storages, meeting rooms, and so forth, it's possible to put together the existing building used for the meetings and so forth, the new archive, because we cannot use the old building for the archive because an archive has very specific static requirements, and the offices to the two sides where the lighting conditions are the better. This produces a building that is very compact. It's 70 by 50. And that offers an amazing terrace at the top that can become public, which is accessible through this sequence. So from the garden to the portico on the side, through a very monumental stair in the middle to this public platform. On this level, this building looks pretty much like a traditional Renaissance building, such the Basilica Palladiana or the Loggia in Brescia, which are also very pragmatic buildings, because at the lower level, they have all sort of shopping facilities, storages, blah, blah, blah. And then at the top, they have this gigantic public room that is very interesting because it was always super indeterminate in terms of function. So you can use it for whatsoever. And they're also building that, in a way, they're not so monumental in their immediate environment, and they become clear, the scale become clear more than anything in the roofscape of the city. So this allows also to have a lot of permeable soil and garden around the building, and this is a bit the situation. It is also important to notice that by doing this, we don't need to demolish the almost new building that is along Rrugë Panorama. And this is a bit the operation, like this is the existing building, this is the envelope, this is how it can be expanded, this is the existing, and next to existing there's the archive, and then there are the offices on the two sides. This is a bit the surface that becomes available to the public. This is the circulation. This is the public circulation with this very important stairs leading to the public terrace structure. So this is, again, the use of soil, and this is a bit the impact of the building onto the roofscapes and skyline of Tirana, which you see that the building is very present, very public, very monumental. At the same time, from the street level, the building is much more delicate, as we will see later. So these are a bit of plans. You see, this is in black is the existing building that is kept as it is. It's just repurposed in terms of function. The very rational grid is extended through the new parts of the building, and then this is a typical plan where you see archive, which is extremely standardized, and it's made for compactus and super logical. And this is the old building that is used for all of the dark functions, and the offices are around. This is a plan of the public terrace at the top. And here's very clear in black the existing building and the other three sections, one next to the other. Of course, this is a schematic section. Things will need to be verified. We need to have probably a more accurate survey on the status of this building, but in principle, is an easy operation. It's also an operation that, to a certain extent, can be done in phases. So it's possible to imagine that this building is still working while at least one of the two parts is built, and then the rest of the operation and the vault is completed. Of course, this is also a scheme of sustainability of this building. The building is naturally ventilated. The roof, the big space under the roof is not conditioned, so it's open air. It's protected and shaded, but it is not, you don't need to heat it in winter, and you don't need to cool it in the summer. On the contrary, this thing contributes to heating in winter and cooling in summer for the rest of the building. This is something that we are now doing with a library we are building in Milan, which we know and has been developed together with Atmos Lab. And I think it's relatively, how to say, we're relatively experienced in this thing. And this is how the building appears from the ground floor. And you see that it is not so massive. It's not so imposing. Also because this, the cadaster is a monument to a certain extent. It's a very important public facility for imagining a sustainable growth of the city, but it's not exactly a city hall. It's also not a public library. So it's one of those kind of secondary apparatus of public space, public buildings that are needed in a contemporary city. And so it has also this very calm and simple garden next to it, this portico that is very approachable and easy to use. And then inside, it has this space that we call a public terrace, but it's sort of forum that can be used for events at the scale also of the entire city. So like these big halls of the Basilica Palladiana or the Loggia, these can host some sort of special events, and special events that I don't think we need to carefully name.
Sorry, just to remind you about the time, 5 minutes left.
Yeah. I think we are done almost.
So I talk briefly about a very, very good idea from Simone Boudvin, who's our artist collaborator. And he came up with an idea that starts to talk about the human scale everywhere in the building. It's an idea that maybe we should have come up with as architects. And maybe even if we don't win, it might work for someone else. But he started to think about the hand and the body and started to really detail various kind of relations of how the body relates to the building. So he started designing lights, and then he started designing technical equipment, and then he started designing signage, and then he started designing door handles. And so in this gigantic project, he came up with this kind of simple scheme to bring, it's several hundred apartments. It's also several hundred offices. So it's quite, and at least 4 agencies so far. So it's a kind of idea based on the hand, which he based on the Bordeaux bottle, about kind of rethinking how we relate to these gigantic buildings. And he sort of just in this small scale jump made an extremely attractive, frankly, architectural proposal. I feel sort of, I don't know what the difference in this case is between art and architecture. So we're quite taken by that, and sad he's not here, but it's a good scheme. And it starts to kind of come into our places. So his handrails, his lights come into this little messy student room, but it also comes in as a light and a door handle in a slightly more luxurious apartment. And it starts to be the exterior balcony handles that you then lean on the balustrade on the outside of the square tower. And then even here, it lastly, in this kind of largest form, becomes a kind of vent for the garage. And so what he's done is kind of reconnect the building to the body. And I think that's a very strong part of finding your way in all of these buildings. So it's the signage, it's the door handle, it's the story of the place, actually, as the workers and residents experience it.
Thank you for the presentation. I kind of appreciated the idea of having the same approach to the different locations and having different results. Still, at the same time, it feels like there's a lot of a relationship between the new buildings and the environment in a way that it feels like the buildings are there since ever, like the other buildings. I appreciated that, actually. I was wondering, because you stressed a lot the relation between the buildings. I'm talking about the towers, especially. Here, it's quite clear how the public space is used. In the other one, you mentioned that the ground floor has much importance for your project. To me, it felt more like a residual area of your strong gesture of these three shapes that you extruded. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
That's a completely reasonable question. I think when we looked at this site, we saw a lot of things happening and a lot of movements across that we couldn't quite predict. And so on the one hand, it's like the center of a campus. On the other hand, it's a space like the Quad, not unlike, say, when you look at a big fancy university campus where you have to have all these paths going around. And so we thought that essentially it was a place of movement, and that's our building tried to respond to that and direct movement around our public offering. So that's sort of how it came to pass. It wasn't that we lifted it first. We sort of wanted that passage seemed essential to us when we read the site.
And it's also, this here is a quite heavy traffic street. And on the back, we don't exactly know what's going to happen, because at the moment there's a low building that most likely will be redeveloped soon, knowing the dynamics in Tirana. So the idea is to at least keep a lot of space for whatever kind of situation might happen, to keep the possibility to go through and to keep the thing permeable, and then to design a micro geography of little more protected areas like this one, and to generate a complex interaction of entrances to the housing, entrance to the student housing, and entrance to the public program at the lower 5 levels. So this, I think, will not generate a crazy urban intensity, but at this micro scale, I think it could work.
Sorry, because I couldn't follow from the beginning, and maybe I'm just repeating something that was said. But I would simply like to know about these facades that seems like closed, how they function.
So they're not closed. They're also aluminum shutters that go up and down that allow transparency. And so we show them sometimes open, sometimes not. They run on tracks. And so the bar part is set back, right? So the bar part has sun shading and it's set back, and that becomes a terrace as the way to shade the apartments. And behind that is a semi-glass facade with dark parts underneath. And then behind what looks like a dark facade on the square building are shutters with tiled facade behind it, and that sometimes they're loggias.
Yeah, they all go up and down, and it's just because
All of them are the same. I mean, in every facade, we have the same in every piece, in every.
no. Like these
Yeah.
on the squarish core,
The circular and on the triangular.
circular one, they're all the same. And behind, we have windows that are not necessarily all the same. There are also pieces that are just walls behind that.
But on the triangle side, there's also, the windows are much less deep, right? So they're pressed to the side. Wait, go back. Right, and so you see that the floor plate is thicker, also for the sun shading, also to reduce the environmental impact. So the bars always set back, and the three legs have different facade elements, and they all three don't specifically react to the direction that they face, but they are adjustable to the different moments of the day.
So actually we have two systems. One is in the cores where you have the shading outside, and one is in the bar where you have the balconies all around that reduce the solar radiation in summer.
Jumping back to the public building, another lighting question. In the existing portion, the floor plate looks very deep. Is there natural daylighting in that in that portion?
In this part?
Yeah.
No. The idea is we have a specific function that allows us to have a very fat building that will have a lot of thermal inertia, so help sparing a lot of energy, because we have archive and we have a lot of storage and we have a lot of meeting rooms and things like that. Then, of course, the program can be adapted, and I think it has to be developed together with client, but it's a super rational grid that can be adapted to many different scenarios.
So does that mean that the existing building is going to be changed, like the interior? So
The interior, yes, not the structure, but the partition. Of course, it's still a bit schematic.
Maybe one question about the tower. Could it also be thought as totally generic, that you can also use it as an office, or is it important for you that it's following the scheme of the floor plan, that is very elaborated?
It works very well if you have things with cross ventilation, and that's important to us. So given that, I think it's totally possible to have floors of office if that's what's required. I don't know that in Tirana, at this particular spot, we would think about an office building that big, but certainly the cores work for that, as do the whole building systems. That needs to happen. It could.
And also to include a hotel?
Surely. I mean, the student cluster is in fact a hotel plan, almost precisely. So you would organize it almost identically, and it would be quite a nice hotel, as it will be a nice student house.
Thank you.
Yeah, the overall logic is this is very regular, and there's some special parts around the cores. And this is easier to do in the student housing, but we're trying to do also in the apartments, which of course requires joining a piece of this and a piece of that. But let's say to do the opposite operation, to go back to a more simple organization is easy.
One question, having you in this plan, do you need the 3 cores? Is that fundamental for your or
For structural reasons,
structural resource and for
it should be balanced. Then of course, structures are never really a problem of structures, they are a problem of money. You can also do it unbalanced, but it's just crazily expensive.
But maybe to answer that question differently, it's very efficient in terms of the floor plan, meaning there are virtually no hallways. Of course, we drew the plan many times in other ways where you end up with hallways and exit off of some of the outside circulation space. And technically that is possible if that's how you want to develop the building. But indeed, following Pier Paolo's thought, like for sure those legs must hold up. But in terms of staircases, there are other possible arrangements. But I think that we like this one.
Okay.
I'm committed to it.
Well, at least my partner is committed to the project, so I think we can close it here on a positive note.
Well, they tell me to cut. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your detailing and everything. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue with the fourth presentation of the concept design. We'll listen to the international jury and the company of the team of Cook Research Architecture Bureau Laboratoire.
Enjoy. That's the key word for the whole project, for the town. We want you to enjoy. We've never had such a good time. Our two officers haven't worked together before, been eyeing each other for quite a long time. They had the office experience. They built many office buildings. I do what I do, as you know. And this is the view you see from the north. By the way, I'm Peter Cook. This is Yanis Erikopoulos. And we've been head-on honest with the two guys that have been most probably pushing this project. The concept came very early on of moving the main core to the back and having a sub-core, thereby creating what I like to call the nest. And you'll see the significance that when we come up. These things are probably self-evident, but I want to reiterate all these points that so many office blocks are just a box, a package with sort of who knows what inside of it. In this town, as it's coming, and this is my fourth visit to Tirana, I see that there's a sort of funny conversation going on between different powers, but I think there's still not a sense of the centers that somehow I would, if I was maneuvering the whole city, I would nuance one center in one direction and another center in another direction. London's too old for that, but you're not in tower terms. The tower's to do with celebrating. Enjoy isn't just a throwaway word. This tower is meant to suck up aspects of the city, aspects of the energy of the city, and make it enjoyable. Sustainability isn't just a sort of byword. It's to do with the pulsating of the building. And you will see that not only do the components, these, by the way, these are funny scribbles, which sometimes I think bypass the sort of verbose nature of diagrams. But basically, the pulsating is of the activities which you'll see, but also it's of the skin itself, of the body itself, and the dialogue with the city. This drawing was generated from almost a traditional thing of looking at the key parts, the key special parts, these jaws, as we sometimes call them in the office, these destinations, resorts. And the word resort is also very, very important, because it's a resort can exist in a city where you go towards a certain thing for certain activity, where you go at the weekend, where you go on the night off, or where you go early in the morning. The notion of the resort, rather than just a function, is very important. Next slide. So we were concentrating a lot on the nature of the jaw. Could the jaw be sometimes enclosed? Could the jaw sometimes be very bright colors? And the color palette, which I wear my color palette on my sleeve or on my shirt because it's very important. And this particular selection of colors is not one that we would use in London, not one that we would use in the other cities where I've done colored buildings. And I think it's very important that we moved towards this particular palette, some of which is looking to the mountain, some of which is looking to Albanian red, but also the blue. The blue, to me, is an artificial color. It's also an urbane color. It's a color which does not usually exist in buildings, although I have done actually 4 blue buildings, of which these are 2. The thing I would reiterate again is that we have constantly had feedback from all these four buildings that people really enjoy being in them. It's not just that it's a sort of tart-up or paint-up job. It's actually that they really enjoy being in something that cheers people up, but in the gloomy months of the year has a presence. And I would report that having built in Vienna in particular, which is a city I know very well, this dark, grey, white city where when the wind blows, it really cheers you up to see something almost as if it's come from the seaside. Next. And so we make a very straightforward analysis of what we have done in the building. There are 4 destinations, as it were, plus the ground one, which I'll come on to, and a series of very straightforward plans in which the nest condition is this, the structural ring is in around the nest and another structural ring around the back. Now here you see that the main core is actually quite generous, so that this space is not just a throwaway space of people waiting for elevators. It's a place where it's a very deliberate spill out with occasionally glimpsed views down to the highway. And so from the top downwards, we have proposed that there should be a hotel. Doesn't have to be a hotel, but it seems such a good location, and we know about trying to get a hotel room in this town. And so that there's of course a considerable similarity between the organization, the floor plan of the hotel, or the study bedrooms. It's some of the interstitial things happening will be different. And also what is going on here, down the nest, is a vent. You'll see the significance of this a bit later in terms of the ventilation of the building. And next, when we move to the offices, again, the nest condition can be interpreted in many, many ways. It can be filled, it can be evacuated, it can be sunken, it can be played with sectionally. And so there's a lot of flex within the nest and the outer ring situation. And here we come down to ground. You'll find rather more stuff on the ground in the brochure, in the leaflet. But here we've not done the conventional thing of a sort of atrium, lobby, or whatever. We've actually done a kind of intriguing dig. It's a sort of teaser. You go along the street and you don't see a bloody great entry hall. You see this sort of dell, this carved out condition, which you can enter either slowly by a slow moving ramp like in a park, or you can go quickly in. And when you get into there, the hotel is actually accessed by the small core. You go into the entrance, you're taken straight up to the top of the hotel. You come out in the elevator space and you can see up in what we call the pavilion, the kind of barn-like thing which is at the top, which is a very, very almost unique space. Here we're looking down into that hotel entrance, or for many people, the main core which leads for the students, the offices, or whatever else it turns out to be. And around is a kind of art wall, and our local sculptor is given the run of the pit. So there's really a kind of art pit, a sort of, not surreptitious, but something you come upon intriguedly. And then we come on to the plans of the resorts. This is the pavilion. Here, the pool and restaurant, because the pool and restaurant are going to be used both by students and by hotel guests. Now, that's a rather interesting sociological issue, which we could discuss at great length. But the pool is for the sort of all-day nighttime part. And of course, again, the key point I want to make is that the nests could be reinterpreted. They are there, they are an instrument, they can be reinterpreted, but this, we think, is a good sort of typical set, so to speak. Alternative. Then we come down to the Arboretum. Now, the Arboretum is the source of the wind tunnel, and it's a place which you can relax to. So we assume that the Arboretum would be used by many different categories of people in there. At certain times, maybe used by the students or by office workers who want a bit of a break, a sort of super breakout. And you'll see in the pictures that the atmosphere of that is very, very different from the rest. Here we have the music deck. I think it's suggested not as a sort of big-time venue, but as really a music deck for locals. Again, probably including the students to have sort of ad hoc groups playing, etc. It's an offering. And of course, it operates in the middle of the office territory, but when the office workers have gone home, unless they want to hear the music. And
Sorry,
so,
just 5 minutes left
okay,
for my time.
This is the atmosphere of the pavilion. This is the calmer atmosphere of the pool, with the views, of course. And you may be asking about this, which is really echoing very much the physiognomy of the mountains. The calm atmosphere of the Arboretum, the more zany condition of the music deck, and maybe, Yanis, you can...
Why don't we talk about the second building, and then we can pick up the technical.
Okay, right. Second building, we very much respected the pre-existent building, which has just been reclad. We take on the same color palette, and we do a very simple wrap. We nurse it, we keep it, and then we create an atrium condition, which generates the extended part of the building. You want to roll on there?
Okay, I just briefly wanted to make some key project decisions that we made, which make the tower plot an incredibly high-performing building from a sustainability and environmental point of view. So from day one, we made the deliberate decision to place the main building core on the southern extremity of the plan, and that has the consequential effect of protecting about a quarter of the elevation from the worst orientation in terms of sun. The structural diagram is a continuation of how the building is expressed on the elevation, in as much as the 4 volumes are propped up by a truss level floor, and this enables those open air terraces to be column free. And then it's imagined that on each one of those truss levels, which cantilever between 2 cores, is allocation for plant, which again frees up the top roof pavilion. The facade has been parametrically designed to reflect sun orientation. So the southern side of the building is very solid, moving on towards a much more open northern elevation. And that just in some way explains the faceted approach to the massing. So the building windows reflect sun orientation. And then very briefly, I mean, these are views of how this triangulated facade, which picks up on some of the language of the core and jaws, is expressed internally, but there is integrated ventilation, and we didn't want to create a glass building or a sealed box. This building breathes through a series of openings in the windows. And then very quickly on the environmental strategy, as Peter alluded to, the fact that we have open air double height volumes interspaced along the building enables us to bring air through the central openings. So the top 2 volumes have the opportunity for natural ventilation, and then we can discuss in more detail what these are later. And just a second point on this building, again, we're exploring similar geometries from from the tower in the way the faceted language invites you and draws you into the ground floor. And essentially, a conscious decision to retain the existing building. It's just been reclad with a sort of terracotta type tiling. We're referencing that in terms of the materiality. There is a central space, which is the way you enter the main building, which is in contrast to the darker palette to create a very serene and calm internal atmosphere. And it's envisaged that this effectively extension to the existing building is a contemporary reinterpretation of it. And by way of this horizontal banding, it enables a degree of transparency for the internal floors, but also deals with issues of privacy with adjacent buildings. Yeah, that's.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. And I think I speak in behalf of the whole jury. Thank you, Peter, for being here. It's an honor for us to having you. And I would love you to speak more as you started with the color idea, with the palette of colors, to explain more about why you choose the three primary colors, the red, green, and blue. So why, in this case, as in other cases, you never used before? So.
As you saw, this is just a few of the many sketches that because we came upon the concept quite early, so we're working on the techniques of it, and it was then a question of, if you like, mannerism or iconography. And very important was the view from the avenue that gives this back, and the back is darker. The back is not shrill coloring. In fact, the whole thing is as one has worked over the color palette, it's become less and less shrill, more and more selective, more and more slightly acidic, which I offer as an odd thing to do in this part of the world, because I think as slightly acidic colors talk about urbanism, they talk about artificiality, they talk about progress, they talk about the technology in my strange mind. And yet, of course, red we know is the national color. We see so many attempts at red. In the small project, we're interested in actually not challenging the pre-existing. We're fascinated by it. But here, we say there's something missing. And I have sniffed around this town, you know, for an aggregate of about a week and a half. So, and I'm familiar with dusty southern towns and how you deal with dustiness vis-a-vis urbanism. That somehow, in a sense, this building has the arrogance of lifting itself out of the dust and the resorts look to the broader view. On the other hand, it wants to make more celebratory reference as you get round to the end of the jaw, so to speak. And so this is still, you know, you could say this is still ongoing investigation. But I'm very interested in how one uses certain types of color to respond. And so there is a territory on the back where one gets almost more copper-like, like before it goes green, but the sort of, and also the fact that there's a big drawing which we have in the building, but nowhere to hang it, where you see the actual patination of these colors. They're not bland, flat colors, such as we've used on some of the other buildings. They are nuanced. They're deliberately in strips and sheets and folding. They make a large-scale pattern in the distance, but when you get close to them, they have tonality. And in fact, the thing we were working on right at the end was that they would become brighter at the very bottom and then turn into a sort of, how can I say, not only patinated, but dulled condition. And then as you get to the end of the celebratory part, the brightness is there again, which can be seen from a distance. Now, one question, of course, is what do you do with those panels in 100 years' time? My sniff is that actually they might even be replaced. At the moment, they're seen as metal panels with a lot of perforation. Another thing, if I can be anecdotal, is that I've been very often to Japan, and I'm very interested in fascinated by how some of my friends use bolted-on elements, that you don't go for sort of full-on panel. You actually go for something which is not delicate exactly, but you know is going to be replaced. And I think that's the reality of them, that they're celebratory, just like somebody might change their lipstick. At some point in the future, they would be modified or changed. The other thing, I think, is to do with that, how the back, don't forget in this building, the back is very important. The back is a certain kind of statement. It's almost deliberately monumental. And then the front is exploding that monumentality. So the way in which the monumentality creeps towards the other end of the celebratory parts, I think is a very interesting examination. Nonetheless, having done all that and made the building faceted and responsive to the climate, which is very important. And these guys have actually used those particular hoods in other buildings, so they know they work. Again, we've also, work in progress, we've discussed the possibility of a fading of the pale blue. But then we thought, hold it, that's a little bit too much. We've got enough going on. And so it's a question of the basic principle of the building, the back, the jaws, the nest, which I think is conceptually very important, actually, that you have this, again, future-proofing or potentially future-proofing thing, in which that nest will change. Its interpretation will change with different things, or maybe the hotel goes out of business and becomes all students' things, or the hotel's so successful the students are pushed out. Who knows? I mean, this is the reality of urban life or investment. But and that in a sense reflects back to my very early work of exchangeability, clip on, plug out. It's not totally that, but that is in the essence of the DNA of the building, I think. These things are all related. You know, a surface isn't just a surface. And I've just done enough colored, I call them colored buildings rather than colorful. You can have a colorful building that has no color. But colored buildings are something which most architects are afraid of. I'm not afraid of it. It's where the tile, you know, that is the body of the building. But then certain moments are articulated by this. I know that you guys are not averse to that sort of conversation.
Looking at the book here, there's so much going on in the section of the tower that I think maybe I kind of missed it in the presentation. Could you talk a little bit about how you conceive of as you move up, all of these really large interior spaces in the tower?
Yes, I think, I mean, the basic principle is established, but we've enjoyed the process of folding, that a space is not, just as the tower is not a package, the space is not a box. I mean, we're in a box space here, but you know, the business of folding, I think, was very much understood by the Gothics. Now, there's not a lot of Gothic here, but it's still something, again, in one's instinct, that you take a space and you emphasize that, and then you cosset it. I mean, the business of cosseting, don't really know that English word, but it's sort of something you do to a frail relative or a child. You nurse it, you make the space reach forward. There's a lot of difference between the back of the core condition, which is totally nursing, and the very front. By the way, you might have noticed that quite often, not as a sort of knee-jerk, but quite often we use the very far extension of the resort platforms as a bar. Late at night, this is where you want to be. And it's a little bit private, it's a little bit thrown out into the landscape. And then maybe in the winter, you come back into the core again. You know, it's not just a question of organization, it's a question of folding with the, we have this big drawing somewhere in the building that we wanted to display, which has this section about 3 meters high, but it wasn't, we'll leave it with you if you want to look at it, because I think it's apropos.
Just on the point again about the core distribution, I think that's a decision we made very early on. And as Peter was explaining, it frees up the center of the plan on each floor. And I think at a building of this scale, vertical connectivity, both in terms of circulation, but also from a visual point of view, together with the benefits it gives you in terms of cross ventilation, natural ventilation, is why the section has been drawn in such a way to show that, yes, from a distance, it's essentially 4 volumes being propped up by this jaw-like structure. And then internally, there are further surprises in terms of flexibility, vertical connection. From a structural point of view, we also want to push a flat slab, cross-laminated timber solution to make the building inherently flexible and future-proof. This is something we're doing a lot on our projects.
I wanted to ask you, well, thank you for the presentation, the amazing presentation. I was wondering, well, it's clear that there's these resort areas, and in general, the building seems very generous in terms of public areas, shared communal spaces. I wonder how could you balance that with the request of privacy of different functions?
The 2-core solution works pretty well with that. It's another decision we made, and it's picked up in the section that the upper 2 volumes, which are envisaged as a private hotel, would make use of the secondary core, and that takes you all the way up to the pavilion at the top, which can have a semi-public use by way of a restaurant. I think we're all used to having hotel restaurants and F&B spaces as being publicly accessible, and I think there's an opportunity here to have a rooftop which the public can use. And then as Peter was explaining on the ground floor, the primary core is that used by occupants of the commercial floor plates. So there is it's kind of separated in the 2 entrances at ground floor, if that answers your question.
Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Taking the city.
Yeah. And I think the fact that these are open air spaces is really important to us.
That helps.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Peter, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now carry on with the 5th and last presentation, and that is 15 minutes of presentation by the MAD architects, followed by a Q&A session. Therefore, we invite to the stage MAD architects.
Hello everyone. My name is Ma Yansong. I'm from MAD Architects here. I'm presenting this project on behalf of our team to show you our observation and the concept behind the project. These are our two sites. That's the sketches for two architecture, two towers, basically. You can see they have a different language, but they both try to responding to the context and the site. So I will start from the first one. This is the lot one. We named this project Beyond the Horizon. So you can see a lot of horizontal elements above the site. I'll show you the ideas behind it. First, we like the chaos of the city, different scale, different language, different color. At the same time, the layers of the evolution. So there's a lot of things. I observe the city by layers, the time, the people, the change of architecture, change of the city. So that's become one major language. So that's the final design. You can see basically a simple core, and we divide the building into 3 sections. Each section, we have horizontal slabs. And this is information from the site. So we basically very much like this chaos on the ground floor plan, and we take all these shapes and form the new floor plan, and we put them vertically as a tower. And this is some analysis. Basically, there's a existing building here and another existing building here. So we don't want to block any of those buildings. So we decide to make a tower basically here, and we lift most square meter in the sky. So that's a basic, the first sketch of the project. So this is the existing government building. So on the below this roof, we only keep the core, and we maximum the openness of the site. And then this is a bird view. So you see all this floating slab. It's like lifted above the existing structure. So below this slab, we have most open space to allow the sunlight, the view for this government building, also the neighbor residential building. Also from this rendering, you see that the red block, low rise, that's the existing building. So by lifting everything, we can open the ground level as a public plaza, because all these buildings is very dense on the ground level. And then the floor plan, all the slabs are very simple. We're thinking to use a colored concrete, and for each cluster, the upper floor is bigger than the lower floor. So there's a little cantilever to allow the more sunshine coming down to the ground. Also, the slab can provide a natural sun shading to the interior. That's a lobby. So that's a core, and then the lobby around the core for the tower. So you can see the ground level is a super small. We try to minimize the footprint. And this is like one of the sky, how to say, terrace. And it's more or less a typical floor plan. There's a central core, one core in the middle, and there's balconies and the sun shading around it. And we work with this artist team, Drift. We're thinking this crazy idea to make they like to make a drone shows using the drone. So we're thinking maybe we have a space to hide all these drones, and every day they can fly and show different shows. Right? They to use AI, maybe interact with citizens, so they can program it, all these things, so they can fly around the building differently every day. What this? Oh, that's what they have done. This shows the gardens and the roof terraces. Shows this space in front of the building and behind the building. So we basically leave the site as it is, right? So it has a maximum public space around it. Because here we are the project, we can only build a high rise. All the existing buildings are low rise. So I think we should go like beyond the roof of the low rise to keep all the space open for the low rise, also the citizens. So this shows one typical floor plan, and this shows a possible material for it. So we're thinking concrete, colored concrete. And this shows the basic principle for the structure, a central core with the frames for each cluster. And this shows idea. We have a upper floor bigger and the lower floor smaller, so to allow the sun shading and more lights to the ground. So here you see the basic massing for this tower. And the second one, we call this uplifting. It's a tower, but it's also like a sky village. You have multiple clusters to attach to the central core. It is also the inspiration from local landscape. Everything, the mountain, everything goes up. So the village also goes up. So we want to make the tower also feels very organic, organized, and goes up. Also, this organization of the elements. I will show you. This is an overall look for this tower. The idea from the plan also, we take this scale, which is quite a simple residential dormitory shape, and then we apply them vertically and form the tower. So we start from a tower shape, and then remember this book idea. We open the volume to allow the more light, more view, and then we make a building look like this. So basically, very simple cluster, rectangular elements, but we attach them to the core from different angle. So that's the first sketch of this design. And then we translate it into this. We basically add this new language to the bottom of each cluster, because this become very important structural elements to allow this part attached to the core very efficiently. So this is a view from the top. You see different colors on the roof. This is a detail. So we basically let each cluster away from each other to allow some roof gardens and then the views. And this, we also proposing, because we're using a lot of vertical lines, so maybe we can apply some lighting installation along the facade. This is a view when you look up. We use a lot of solid facade, so the window is actually minimum. We try to keep them very solid. And this is a core, and those surface coming down into the lobby. And this is a typical floor for office. So you see the ratio for the solid part and the window. And this is a dormitory level. And this is a residential level. This is a very interesting floor plan. This is like this new typology for a tower. It's not tower, it's not a slab, but it has a two core, mainly one core. The other one is a small service core, and then we use some corridor and many. This part they have a three-side view, and this side they have a one-side view. So we want to keep the floor plan super efficient. Basically only one core, but a lot of space. And this is a concept I just mentioned to introduce some vertical movement during the night, and possibly emphasize on those different roof terraces. Also continue to the ground level. So there's a big movement from the horizontal to vertical. And of course, we have some open space on the ground level. Also on the roof terrace, we're thinking to introduce more colors and activities to occupy those spaces. So this shows we have design for each terrace different color to responding to the landscape and nature around us. Yeah, that shows the massing and the roof terrace. Sometimes we can use this kind of change overlap to provide some shading area for the outdoor terraces. And the ground level, you can see this is a smaller site compared to the other project, but we also minimum the footprint to allow more outdoor landscape around the building. So this is how the building shrink from the bigger floor plan to the structure. During this transition, we also show some colors. So we have a main color, a red color, but we also show other green, blue colors. You can see the facade is mainly opaque, and then the smaller window give a easy way to make sustainability, also structure efficient, providing the sun shading to the interior. The views, that's the reason we plan all these angles. You see, we have many angles, so the building point different direction, the mountain view, the park, different landscape. So that's some detail.
2 minutes left from your time.
And this shows the facade detail. We're thinking to make standardized concrete panel or GFRP panels for the facade. So basically we're using window wall system, no curtain wall system, very simple. Then we can attach those curved panels outside the solid part. We made some different options, but I think the GFRC maybe is easier for especially for the curve part, right? And this we also made a very simple structure diagram. By the way, we work with a very good structure partner who's having a similar project here in the city. They really built this in the similar way of the high rises. Yeah. I think I have a very short video to show. I think our understanding about this project is, we want to make a new architecture, a futuristic building, but at the same time very contextual, so that can make a building really unique compared to any other building or in other cities. The other thing is we want this building very logical, but at the same time very romantic. So that's the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the impressive presentation. I wonder about these cantilevering parts. Are they balancing each other? Are they relating to each other? Is this a part of the structural concept?
Yes, I think because considering the context around the site at a different height, we actually choose to cantilever to different direction. So, and each cluster has this triangle shape. So I think overall they should balance each other.
Right. So in overall massing, we were trying to balance the sort of volumetric design of it, but also at the same time, we articulated the direction of the cantilever towards where the main view would be around the city.
Or maybe you can, sorry, I think we love it, but I think we don't believe it. It's what we want you is to explain better what the Christian asked. Maybe in the schemes you have structural schemes to understand better that this could be done. I mean.
Yeah, so I would like to ask everybody to look with the eyes of sort of, this is a conceptual, scheme still. And so, as we develop into the SD and DD with, input of the structure engineer, it will get more and more rationalized. But the general sort of structural concept at the moment is that there are going to be central core, and it's actually a sort of stronger core than just a few elevators and stairs. And then these sort of outrigger frames will be cantilevering off of it. And so it's in terms of the sort of a concept, it's nothing new, like it's as if it has multiple volumes that are sort of trussed and cantilevered off of the central core.
I think what maybe would also be helpful if you look at the floor plan of the second project, it's extremely straightforward. It's totally efficient, not one stair too much, not one elevator too much. And then you look at this shape and at this sculpture that is so organic, fantastic. How can we bring these two worlds together? I think this was also the question, right, that you are raising or referring to.
Yeah, just repeat about the structure with PROJEKTET. He's a structural engineer that with him we have been doing several projects here, totally different ones, even in the typology of structure materials. And he's very also cost efficient. And with PROJEKTET, all the, let's say, most interesting towers that are in Tirana, we are doing with them, let's say. We as local architects, but also with the foreign ideas, foreign design. So that's why it was everything capable within this cubic structure, sometimes hang and sometimes uplifting. So it's not a name and an ambitious thing that has never been done, but it's almost done in several projects. Not divided on the heights, but being the old volume coming from, let's say, a very thin belly. But it's the same logic that it will be repeated, but in different heights. So we are very confident also with the structural team.
I think the question was also about the lot 2 and the floor plans and the form making. And so if we could go to maybe the site plan. Okay, so if you look at the floor plans a little bit, this is the sort of a main core areas. We have a main core here and we have secondary core here. But basically all the floor planes are radiating from that core. And then these two cores are connected with the main volume. And so in every single this radiating volumes, they actually come down in these two moments. And then these two cores are connected with the main volume as well. And obviously they're not connected on every floor, but they are braced together. So there are two main vertical elements and they're braced mainly. And then there are some additional radiating volumes that stick out from those.
Also, it was a decision because on the left we have the Faculty of Architecture that is under construction with a very rational architecture, very repetitive colonnade, and also on top of it, it's a curtain volume. And then on the right, it's a possible building that it brings up, let's say, the evolution of this transition of X forms, X volumes of dictatorship regime era that is right on top. And we wanted to be in between them, but being a little bit more refined in architecture. And that's why all this volume that we have been studying on having the same formwork, two type of formworks repeated in each volume. So it will be very cost efficient also, because sometimes it doesn't give the perception that all the volumes look totally different maybe when they are connected to the core. But we have been very efficient on having the two types of formwork. This kind of volumes will be concrete, and then all the vertical ones possibly will be cladding, that we're thinking of this Mediterranean color, let's say, between terracotta and the colored concrete.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation of these two amazing projects. I have a question regarding the plot one, because we have an existing building. Have you thought about now you elevated the whole building above it? Have you thought about how the relation between the existing building and the new building is, and the scale also of your proposal, how it is related to the existing building?
Your question is how we thought of how to relate to the existing building with the new design. Yeah. As Ma was
You're talking about this one, right? So yeah, so I think because around the site we have this building, also this building, also those buildings. I think this is a very tiny site. I think we just want to simply lift the building to here. So it's better for all of them have a view, and also they can keep the program in there and the plaza in front of it.
So in terms of its connection to the existing, as Ma was explaining, because there was so much area that we needed to build in the site, but such a awkward and very small site that's left around the existing building. And so we minimized the footprint on the ground floor, but instead we're connecting sort of an outdoor space between the two. And so that at lobby level, there is an opportunity to be connected interior as well. And then, you know, off of the street and off of the site here, we're sharing an outdoor space where you can connect to the building through the outdoor space as well. And because we lifted up everything, it's also connected at the roof level. So we're not intervening at where the interior spaces are, but we're connecting them through the negative space that's around.
Okay. Thank you.
Just last question, and then we'll let you go. I'm trying to figure out what happens on the ground floor in this one. I think it's a lobby, basically. No, there's no like real interface with the public between offices. Does the public have an opportunity to interface directly anywhere up above, or is it just pure office above? Like, so no public access?
So we wanted to, if you can go to that section diagram. So we wanted to make a sort of balance between the security and openness to the public. And that's why we minimize the footprint on the ground floor so we can open up the most of the negative spaces to the public. However, in terms of the interior program, yes, mainly it's just a lobby at the ground floor. Therefore, there is a secured access if we can consider opening up some of this roof terraces to the public as well. So it's not completely open where, it starts to police the security and safety of the workers inside, but it has that clear sort of a threshold where we can invite the public from outside to inside, but also through a safety sort of screening.
I think to show the democracy and the openness, we want to minimize the footprint. We leave more open space so people can gather here and around the building. According to this tower, I think ground level, second level, and this can be maybe more accessible for everyone. So maybe you can design staircase or something, but people can use this as a part of the park, the square.
No, I think it's everything very straightforward and clear.
Thank you very much, then. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the 10 presentations. We'd like to thank you for your participation and attention, and we'd like to meet you at COD at 1800 hours for the winning project.
Thank you for your participation and attention, and we invite you to meet again at the Center for Openness and Dialogue, COD, near the Prime Ministry at 18 o'clock to announce the winners together.